I went to my biological father's wedding, and they mistook me for a server. I don't know what made me walk in that day. Maybe it was the old letter I found while cleaning out the apartment, or maybe it was the last message from my mom, the one I never had the courage to hand directly to my dad. Or maybe it was the last shred of self-respect I had left, the one they had tried to crush for the past 3 years. I wore a neat black suit, simple, no frills. I carried a small box wrapped in blue silk fabric, inside which was the handwritten letter from my mom before she passed. I parked my car about 3 houses away from the beachfront villa. The wind from the bay was strong. My hair was a mess, but my mind was even more tangled. The house, or should I call it, the place where my dad is getting married, reeked of money and fake pretenses. White drapes hung across iron arches, scented candles lined the path, and champagne was being poured non-stop from a 5-tier crystal tower. It was all so extravagant, it bordered on ridiculous. I walked in. No one recognized me. Not a single surprised glance, not a word of greeting. A man in a tuxedo holding a tray of drinks handed me one and said, "You'll stand by the right wing. You'll serve the VIP tables later." I froze. He thought I was a server. I turned back and looked at the crowd. Everyone was raising glasses, laughing, dancing to the live jazz. In the center was my father, Charles, the man who once carried me on his shoulders, the man who called me his little warrior. And next to him was Cynthia, his new wife, a woman who used to be my mom's best friend. She saw me. Her look wasn't surprise. No, it was annoyance. She walked up, leaned in just close enough to whisper, "Ethan, don't ruin our day. Leave while you still have some dignity." Those words were like a slap across 30 years of living as the son of that man. I didn't answer, but in my head, one thing echoed loud and clear: no. This time, I will not be silent. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 30 years old, living alone in Seattle, nearly 200 miles away from where I stand now. This city, La Jolla, California, used to be home, the place where everything I called family lived. But after my mother passed, it became something else. A place soaked in twisted memories, family photos with the frames replaced, and words that were never spoken. My mother, Allison, was the light of my life. She was an English teacher, always loving happy endings, believing kindness was the strongest language humans could speak to each other. When she passed from cancer, I was 27. No one prepared me for that. No one taught me that loss could be like a blade, not only cutting into your heart, but severing the ties you thought would last forever. My father, Charles, wasn't a bad man, at least he didn't used to be, but he was the kind of man who hated facing pain. Instead of crying, he organized. Instead of remembering, he rearranged everything to forget. And just 6 months after my mother's funeral, he started having dinner with Cynthia, the woman I used to call Mom's fun friend. A year later, she moved in. I didn't lash out. I didn't make a scene. Seattle became my refuge. I found a job, rented a small apartment, adopted a cat named Newton, and started over. We, me and my family, still talked, but less and less. Birthday messages from Lindsay, my half-sister, stopped after the first year I moved. Calls from my dad also stopped when I refused to come home for Christmas. No one said it outright, but I could feel it. Little by little, I was being erased from the picture. I found out about my dad's wedding from an old friend who accidentally sent an invitation meant for someone else to my old address. I hesitated a lot. But when I saw the letter my mother had written, the one I had kept sealed for 3 years, I knew I had to go. Not to congratulate, not to reconcile, but to say what needed to be said once and for all. I didn't expect to be welcomed. I didn't expect them to open their arms to me. But I also didn't think I'd be treated like a stranger, like a nameless waiter slipping into their party, and I definitely didn't expect Cynthia to look me straight in the eye, not blinking, and say in a voice as sweet as sugar, but as cold as ice, "Leave, while you still have some dignity." From that moment, I knew some truths couldn't stay buried, not because I needed their forgiveness, but because my mother deserved to be heard, and I would be the one to speak up, no matter who tried to silence me. I stood there, the glass of wine still in my hand, cold and meaningless. The music continued to play. Laughter still echoed through the grand hall. Not a single person noticed me. Not a look of surprise, not a greeting, as if I were invisible, stepping into a world I didn't belong to. I scanned the room for my father. He was laughing, his hand resting on Cynthia's back as if she were his entire world. His hair had grayed, but he still looked as regal as ever, black suit, red bow tie, bright eyes. He was happy, and I was nowhere to be seen in that picture. A party organizer approached me, her smile polite but forced. "Sorry, sir, you are—" I pursed my lips, nodding slightly. "I'm the groom's son." Her smile faltered, like she was choking on her words. 1 second, 2 seconds, and then she turned to whisper something to a colleague before turning back to me with a look of pity. "Oh, I'm sorry. Your name isn't on the guest list. There must have been a mix-up." I nodded, saying nothing. A mix-up or deliberate? I pulled out my phone, calling my father. 1 ring, 2 rings. Then he picked up. "Ethan." His voice came through as distant as if he were talking to someone from another planet. "I'm here at your wedding. Right now." Silence. I thought he had hung up, but then his voice came back low and dry. "Ethan, why did you come here?" That question sliced through me like a knife. Not, "You're here," not, "Why didn't you let me know?" but, "Why did you come?" I clenched my teeth, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're getting married, and I thought I should be here." "It's been 3 years, Ethan," he replied, and I could hear in his voice not accusation but a conclusion, like my absence had been long enough to erase me from the family tree. I hung up before he could say more. It was useless. I'd been removed from the honor table even before I showed up. I turned, walking away from the room. No one stopped me. No one called my name, as if I had never been a part of their lives, as if I had never been Charles Walker's son. The wind outside howled, strong enough to make me tear up. Or maybe it wasn't the wind. I wasn't sure. I walked toward the car but stopped halfway. I needed to breathe. I needed time, and then I heard a very familiar voice calling out behind me, "Ethan?" I turned around. It was Karen, my mother's best friend, someone I hadn't seen since the funeral 3 years ago. And in her hand was an old, crumpled envelope tied with a silver ribbon. She looked at me, her eyes trembling. "There's something you need to know," she said. I never imagined I'd see Karen again, especially on a day like today. She looked older than I remembered, her hair nearly all gray, her frame thinner, but her eyes were still the same. The eyes of the woman who held me close when my mother passed away. The eyes of my mother's one true friend, the only person I trusted. Karen walked toward me, slowly but steadily, holding the old envelope tightly, as if the sea breeze could snatch it away at any moment. She stopped in front of me, her voice trembling. "Ethan, you've never received this letter, have you?" I shook my head. My heart was pounding in my chest, unsure if it was because of the cold or fear. I looked at the piece of paper she was holding, yellowed with age, the corner folded, the words, "To my son," written in blue ink, my mother's handwriting. "I've never seen it," I said slowly. "Did Mom write this for me?" She nodded, her lips tight as if holding back tears. "Allison gave it to Cynthia, asked her to keep it and give it to you at the right time. That's what your mother wanted, before she passed." I stood frozen. Cynthia, the woman in the white wedding dress inside, raising her champagne glass, stepping into my father's life as if she were his savior. She had kept the letter and never gave it to me. "Why?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Why hide it?" Karen took a deep breath. "Because if you read it, you'd know the truth. And Cynthia didn't want that." "What truth?" She handed the letter to me. My hands were shaking as I took it. I looked at it, but couldn't bring myself to open it. Something inside me felt like a wave rising from the ocean floor, chaotic, cold, and about to break. Karen continued, gently but firmly. "Ethan, your mother knew. She knew that Charles and Cynthia had started something before she passed. She knew you were left behind, pushed out, and she wrote it all in the letter. Not with anger, just the truth. And one more thing. She wanted you to know that you deserve love, that you were never a burden, that you're not small like they made you think." I lowered my gaze, opening the envelope. My hands shook more than usual. My mother's voice echoed in my mind, soft like music in an empty room. The first lines of the letter felt like they were cutting through my chest. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to hold you. But let these words be my last embrace, holding you through the days you think no one needs you." I bit my lip. The wind picked up, stronger now. I didn't cry. Not yet. But everything inside me was cracking apart in pieces. I looked up at Karen, my voice hoarse. She gave the letter to Cynthia to keep, and Cynthia hid it? Karen nodded, her eyes glistening. "I believe she did it to protect your mother, because if you knew the truth back then, maybe you would have fallen apart. But now it's time." I glanced down at the wedding invitation still lying by my feet, then looked towards the brightly lit house in the distance. "No," I whispered, clutching the letter in my hand. "I won't let them bury this for another day." I sat down on the stone bench across from the parking lot. On the other side, the ocean crashed against the shore as if trying to drown everything. Karen had quietly left, leaving me alone with the fragile piece of paper that weighed as heavily as the memories of my childhood. The letter still smelled of lavender, my mother's scent, the scent of the evenings when she used to read books to me when I was young. I opened the letter with trembling hands, took a deep breath, and began to read. "My dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then perhaps I'm no longer with you. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry you have to read these words alone. But there are truths I couldn't take with me to the grave. I need you to know." My eyes moved over the lines, my heart beating faster with each word. The letter was long, but each word, each sentence pierced through the armor I had built up over the past 3 years. "I know that Cynthia and your father started getting closer, even while I was still alive. I saw it in their eyes. It wasn't jealousy. It was sadness. Sad because I spent many nights alone. Sad because my son was being pushed away. And I didn't understand why." I stopped, my lips pressed tightly together. A surge of anger rose within me. Not just because Charles and Cynthia had something going on behind my mother's back, but because they had the audacity to hide it behind their hypocrisy and fake well-wishes. They had invited the priest to pray for my mother. Now it felt more like a ritual to cover their tracks than a farewell. I continued reading. "I know you're sensitive. I know that when I'm gone, you'll feel like you don't belong anywhere. But Ethan, don't let anyone, even family, make you feel small. You are the greatest gift I've ever had. And no matter what they say, no matter what they do, you are enough." I didn't realize when the tears had started falling down my face. The sea breeze blew, cold yet gentle. A small part of me, so small, felt like it was being pulled back from the depths. Like I was being held by my mother one last time. At the end of the letter, my mother wrote in her familiar slanted handwriting, "Live the way you want, not how others expect. Walk with your head held high. Don't let them take your voice from you. I love you, Mom." I sat there for a long time, holding the letter as if I let go, I would lose her again. And then I stood up. The lights from the mansion in the distance still glowed, like a play that hadn't closed its curtains. I looked toward it, then looked back at the letter, like a promise. They may have buried this letter from me, but they can't bury the truth. Tonight, I'll go back, not to apologize, not to reconcile, but to remind them that I am the son of Allison Walker, and I'm still here. I walked away from the parking lot like someone who had just escaped a storm, not because of the weather, but because of what I had just read. I wasn't trembling anymore. No hesitation, no fear. I turned back to the mansion, the place where everything began, and where I would end the silence that had lasted for 3 years. As I entered for the second time, the music was still lively, the clinking of glasses filling the air, and people were raising their glasses to celebrate the happiness of Charles and Cynthia, as if the whole world had agreed that this was a beautiful love story. I stopped at the entrance. No one noticed me right away. I saw my father, still holding Cynthia's hand, laughing with a group of guests near the podium. Lindsay was taking selfies with her friends, and no one, absolutely no one, looked in my direction until I walked straight toward the stage. I didn't run. I walked slowly but decisively. Each step felt like it was crushing every unsaid word, every hug I was denied, every family dinner that never had my name on it. The first person to notice me was Lindsay. She furrowed her brow and whispered something to someone else. Then more heads turned. The room began to buzz. I reached the stage, stood next to the microphone, gently pulled on the mic cord, and flicked the switch. The sound echoed. All eyes turned toward me. I held the letter in my hand. "I'm sorry," I said. "I know I'm not on the guest list, even though I am the biological son of the groom." A wave of whispers spread through the room. Charles froze. Cynthia stood up quickly, walking toward me, speaking loud enough for me to hear clearly. "Ethan, this isn't the time. Don't add more drama." I turned to face her, my eyes calm. "I didn't bring the drama. You brought it in when you hid this letter." I raised the letter. The entire room went silent. "This is a letter from my mother, Allison Walker, written to me, her son. Before she passed away, she had someone deliver it to me. But this letter never reached me. Until today." Cynthia inhaled sharply, ready to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. "There's truth in this. Words from the woman who was once your wife, Charles, and my mother. She talks about what happened, about how she was pushed aside, and how I, her son, was pushed aside as well." I looked directly at my father. "Dad, she knew. She knew everything. About you, about Cynthia. About how her son was forgotten in the very house she once called home." Charles looked as if he had just been punched in the chest. I continued, my voice choked but clear. "She wrote, 'Ethan, you are not small. It's not your fault they turned away. You deserve to be loved, and don't let them take away your voice.'" I took a deep breath. No one spoke. No more clinking glasses, no more music. Just me, the letter, and the gazes of dozens of people facing something no one had dared to bring up. I lowered my hand, gripping the letter tightly. And today, I'm doing just one thing. I'm giving my mother's voice back. And I'm giving myself back into this family's story, whether they want it or not. The room remained still. It was as if time itself had frozen in a moment that stretched on forever. Cynthia stood there, her pure white wedding dress now looking out of place under the chandelier lights and the weight of countless eyes on her. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was thin, like a mask she wore. "Ethan," her voice still sweet, but lower now, more somber. "Your mother. She wasn't entirely stable in her final days. Maybe you don't know this, but the doctors said, 'Stop!'" I cut her off, my voice firm. "Don't use my mother's mental health as an excuse to justify hiding the letter. You're not a doctor. You don't have the right." Cynthia's gaze shifted, her mask cracking. "You were never the one I wanted to keep in this family, Ethan, and you know that." Whispers spread across the room like waves crashing on the shore. Some guests lowered their heads. Others turned to whisper to one another. Someone even quietly pulled out their phone, beginning to record. Lindsay stood up from the table behind me. "Enough," she yelled. "This is Dad's wedding day. Ethan, you just want attention. You're always like this, playing the victim, then demanding respect while you're the one who walked away." I turned to face Lindsay. "Walked away? Or did you and Dad make it impossible for me to stay? Every time I tried to come back, did you ever open your arms, or just stand there with accusing eyes?" Lindsay opened her mouth to reply but couldn't say anything. Her eyes wavered, confused, as if it was the first time she truly saw me, really saw me. I lowered my voice, but it wasn't gentle. "Lindsay, you got all the love I lost. You were the golden child, the light of the family. And me? I was the survivor of a party I wasn't invited to." Cynthia stepped forward, trying to snatch the letter from my hand. "Enough. You don't have the right to read it out loud here. This is private." I yanked the letter out of her reach, my voice harsher than ever. "Private? You hid it from me for 3 years, and now you call it private? No, this is the truth, and I've stayed silent long enough." I turned to my father. "And what about you, Charles? You stood there, letting others speak for you, decide for you, hide for you. Mom passed away less than 6 months ago, and Cynthia took her place. Don't you find that strange?" He didn't answer. His face was pale. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not the weak little boy I once was. I continued, my voice as hard as steel. "I let them take my place in this family. I let them erase Mom's name from your life, but today, I'm taking it all back." I stepped down from the stage and placed the letter on the table in the middle of the room, between unfinished glasses of wine, untouched desserts, and the uncomfortable stares no one knew where to avoid. "This is what my mother left behind, and none of you have the right to hide it anymore." I looked around. The room was silent, and me? I had never felt clearer. I don't remember how I left the banquet hall. All I can recall is hearing someone call after me, the yellow lights flickering on the cold stone floor, and Cynthia's eyes, wide open, not out of fear, but because for the first time she lost control. I stepped outside. The wind picked up, stronger than before. The night had settled in deeper, but it wasn't as cold as when I arrived. In my hand, there was nothing but emptiness, but in my chest, it was full of sorrow, anger, and oddly, relief. It's strange, isn't it? When you say everything you need to say, you don't feel lighter. You just know you're no longer carrying it alone. I leaned against the wall outside the villa, breathing heavily. A moment later, the door behind me opened. I heard the familiar footsteps. Even though it had been 3 years since I last heard them, I still knew. It was my father. Charles stood a few steps away. No coat, his white shirt stained with wine, his tie loose and disheveled. We locked eyes. No words for a few seconds. Then he spoke. "Ethan, I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I held his gaze. This was the man who taught me to ride a bike, who held my mother's hand when they stood at the wedding altar, who cried when the doctor told us there was no chance for her. And yet, this was also the man who stayed silent as I was pushed out of the family. erased from every picture frame. "Do you know," he said, his voice low, trembling, "when you read that letter, I couldn't breathe. Not because I was angry, but because I realized everything I tried to avoid facing finally came crashing down." I folded my arms, waiting for him to continue. I knew something wasn't right. When Allison passed, I thought keeping the family together was the only thing I could do. Cynthia, she's strong, knows how to handle things. I let her take control of everything, the funeral, the property, even the emotions of everyone. I nodded, just a little. And my mother's memory? Charles looked up at me, his eyes wet. I was weak. Not in the way people usually think of weakness, but in a far worse way. I let someone else fill the void instead of learning to live with it. And in doing that, I lost you. I wanted to speak, but nothing came out. Cynthia said you needed time, that it was better not to force you back if you chose to leave. I believed her. I believed you didn't care. I convinced myself of that to avoid feeling guilty. I swallowed, trying to stay calm. And when you saw the wedding invitation wasn't sent to me, you still thought that was okay? Charles closed his eyes for a moment. I didn't look at the guest list. I didn't think you'd come. I let out a bitter laugh, not out of amusement, but because it hurt. And that made you feel relieved, didn't it? He didn't argue, he just looked down and sighed. But when I saw you walk up to the stage, holding that letter, he lifted his gaze. I felt small, not because you caused a scene, but because you were the only one in that house who dared to speak the truth. I stared at him for a long time. "Do you believe what Mom wrote?" I asked. He nodded. Every word the sea breeze picked up. We both stood there, silent, like two survivors of a battle. But I knew the final fight hadn't come yet. I took a deep breath. "So, if you really believe it, then it's time to do the right thing." Charles looked at me. "What do you want?" I answered, firm but calm, like stone. "It's not what I want. It's what Mom wanted. And she wanted the truth, to see the light." I thought it was over. I thought that when I walked out of that villa, after the half-hearted wedding and the first real conversation with my father in years, I had done what needed to be done. The letter had been revealed. The truth was out. The mask had fallen. But I had forgotten one thing. When you take control away from someone who's used to running everything, they don't step back. They strike back. 3 days after the wedding, I received a letter. Not a handwritten one. No silver ribbon, no scent of lavender. Just a standard printed envelope sent from a law office in San Diego. I opened it without thinking much, and then I froze. Cynthia was suing me. The charges listed defamation, disruption of a private event, and intentional damage to the family's public image. They also claimed, through acts of intrusion, false statements, and the spreading of unverified information at a private wedding event, Mr. Ethan Walker has caused harm to the reputation and community relations of Mrs. Cynthia Moore Walker, along with her legitimate family. I laughed, a dry, hollow laugh, not just because of the blatant wording, but because I realized She still thought this was a power game. I took a photo of the letter, sent it to my father with just one line. "This is the person you once trusted." He called back in 5 minutes, his voice tight like a string ready to snap. "You don't need to worry. I'll handle it." "No, Dad," I interrupted. "I don't need anyone handling things for me anymore." That night, I sat down at the computer, opened my mother's old blog, the one where she used to post about education, literature, and little stories about me when I was young. The blog had been abandoned since she passed, but I knew the account was still active. The password was still the name of my first cat, Marbles123. I posted the first article in 4 years. The title, "My Mother's Letter," and the truth buried beneath a white wedding dress. In it, I wrote clearly, the letter wasn't a weapon. It was a final word from a mother who wanted to be remembered for who she truly was. I didn't embellish. I didn't fabricate. I just brought the truth into the light. The truth that others tried to keep hidden because it was too inconvenient to face. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't ask for shares, no hashtags, but I sent the link to everyone who had been at the wedding, and then I waited. Only 6 hours later, I received the first message from Rebecca, my cousin in New Jersey, who I thought had forgotten about me. "Ethan, I read your post. I read the letter. I really didn't know what happened, but I believe you. And I'm sorry for staying silent." Then came a message from the old gardener. "Mr. Rowell, from a former colleague of my mom's. Miss Clara, from an old neighbor. From high school friends, from those who had known my mother, who had respected her, who had wondered why I was no longer part of the family photos. They all said the same thing. We didn't know what happened, but now we know. Something happened." And Cynthia? The next day, her lawyer sent a letter demanding I take down the post immediately, or else I'd face further legal action. I didn't respond. I just updated my post with one more line. "Truth is not something you can sue to make disappear." I don't know what's stranger, the fact that my post spread so quickly, or the fact that those who I thought had forgotten me were the first to speak up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Notifications kept popping up, Gmail, Facebook, even old email addresses I hadn't seen since college came back to life. A message from Aunt Celeste, my mom's sister, who had stopped talking to me after the funeral. "Ethan, I'm sorry. Cynthia said you needed space, that you didn't want to stay in touch with the family. I believed her. Now I know I was wrong." Another message from James, my best friend from middle school. "My mom used to say Cynthia wasn't a good person. I didn't believe her. Now I understand why you left. I wish I had asked you sooner." Then came a message that left me breathless. Uncle Tom, my father's brother, who hadn't spoken a word to me in 3 years. Allison's letter made me cry. She was the best in this family. "Ethan, you're not alone, and you were never the problem." Just like that, the silence started to crack. I thought I only had my mom's voice echoing from a yellowed letter. But it turns out, that voice was never alone. It had just been smothered by people who were very good at hiding the truth. Lindsay messaged too, a short message. "We need to talk." I read it over and over. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrong, but at least it was the first time she had reached out since my mom passed. And Cynthia? Nothing. No rebuttal, no statement to deny anything. She stayed silent, and that silence to me was the loudest confession. For so many years I thought I had been forgotten by the world, that I was just a shadow at the edges of a perfect family. But I was wrong. I wasn't forgotten. I was deliberately made to be forgotten, and that difference was huge enough to change the rest of my life. The next morning, when I woke up, my post had been shared over 18,000 times. Not because it was sensational, not because it had a shocking headline, but because it was the truth. The kind of truth people crave in a world too familiar with painted stories. And then I got a call. Not from a stranger, not from the media, but from my father. His voice was softer, but determined. "Ethan, it's time for me to do my part. There's no one to represent this family except you." I didn't answer right away. But in my heart, one thing was clear. The old order was collapsing, and for the first time I wasn't standing on the sidelines of it. A week after the wedding, I returned to the old house. Once the Walker family home, now a place for tense meetings and words that were never truly spoken. My father, Charles, was the one who invited me back. Not to have a private conversation, but to end it all. Publicly, clearly, no more gray areas. The living room where my mother had once hung her self-painted artwork was now replaced by a large, gold-framed wedding photo of Charles and Cynthia. But this time, it didn't shine with warmth like before. It felt like a reminder of everything that had been misplaced. Cynthia sat at one end of the table. Lindsay was beside her, arms crossed, eyes avoiding mine. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. I walked in. No one greeted me. I didn't need them to anymore. My father stood up from his chair at the center, holding a stack of papers, his eyes clearer than I'd ever seen them, as if the darkness had finally cleared from his pupils the moment my mother's letter was revealed. He began slowly, but without hesitation. "Cynthia," he said, "I believed you. I let you arrange things, make decisions after Allison passed. At times, I thought I should be grateful, but in reality, I let you erase part of the past I had no right to deny." Cynthia opened her mouth, but he raised a hand to stop her. "I'm not saying this to argue," he continued. "I'm saying it to declare. Starting today, you no longer represent any assets, legal decisions, or family image related to the Walker family." The room fell silent. Lindsay looked up, her eyes wide. "Charles!" Cynthia jumped to her feet. "What are you doing?" "Righting a wrong," he replied, colder than I'd ever heard. I pushed Ethan aside. I let his mother's letter be hidden. I allowed my son to feel abandoned just because I was too afraid of feeling pain again. But now, I choose to face it. He turned to me. "Ethan, I've signed the papers. Your mother's will, the original, still stands. Everything she wanted to leave you will be returned, including the old house you and she shared, her personal blog, now in your name." I stood frozen, unable to believe my ears. "And one more thing," he said, walking to the center of the room. "In front of everyone, I declare, Allison Walker is not a name to be forgotten. And Ethan Walker is the only one in this family who has kept the promise not to let her disappear. Cynthia looked like she froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Lindsay stood up. "Dad can't do this. Mom..." "No, Cynthia. She's your wife. She's part of..." "No, Lindsay," Charles cut her off. "She's the legal wife, but she wasn't the one who kept the home alive. And being legal doesn't always mean it's right." He turned back to me. "My son," he said, then extended his hand. "You don't have to forgive me yet, but if you can, let me start again." I looked at that hand. The hand that once taught me to tie my shoes, that used to stroke my hair when I was afraid. There were times I thought I'd never take that hand again. But this time, I reached out. I took it, and I held it tight. Not because I forgot, but because I knew. To rebuild, you first have to be willing to tear down everything that isn't real. I didn't go back to Seattle right away. Instead, I moved into my mother's old house, the one my father had kept for years but hadn't stepped foot in since the funeral. The house was small, no happy family sign in front, and it no longer had the smell of cinnamon rolls baking in the morning like my mom used to make. But it had sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. The place where my mother used to sit and write the blog posts that I now read through my tears. I cleaned every room, took down the old photos replaced by new ones, opened the bookshelf Cynthia once said didn't match the modern decor. And I found so many things my mother left behind, not objects, but her spirit. Every blog post, every notebook, every faded Polaroid photo whispered one thing: "You're not something they need to accept. You are something they should cherish." Charles, my father, started coming by every weekend, not to check up or rebuild the relationship, just to sit with me, drink tea, look out the window at the garden, and stay silent when needed. Each time I could feel a little of the father I once knew, the one who'd put a fake bug in my lunchbox just to make me laugh. Lindsay hasn't come by. She sent a text saying she wasn't ready. I wasn't mad. A part of me understands. The truth isn't something everyone can swallow all at once. As for Cynthia, she dropped the lawsuit. No apologies, no explanations, just silence. But this time, it wasn't scary anymore. It was an end. I didn't retaliate, no attacks, no opening old wounds, because I understood. When you find your voice, you don't need to shout anymore. That day, I posted the final entry on my mother's blog. My mother taught me that family isn't where you're born, it's where you're seen, heard, and loved, even when you're not perfect. For years, I thought I needed to be invited back to the table. But I was wrong. I don't need an invitation. I just need to remember who put that table there in the first place. Now I know. I don't need them to acknowledge me as part of the family. I am family, to myself. And my mother is still here in everything I choose to hold on to. Thank you, Mom, for leaving me not just a letter, but an escape. Don't let anyone take away your voice, even if they share your last name. Don't wait for others to accept you as part of their life. Learn to stand tall, even if you stand alone. Because some truths need to be heard. And some people, like you, like me, are not born to stay silent. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever seen yourself in any part of this journey, leave a comment. I will read it, every single word. We're not as alone as we think.